You know, versus like.
Right, it makes you more anxious.
I think for everyone. I'll take notes here. I'm taking
That's amazing. I love that. Are we can introduce this?
Fine.
Neil.
Do like a collaboration.
Was
They're gonna pay you before.
Just be careful not to touch this. Okay. Test. Test 1, 2. Test 1, 2. we're gonna start. Guys, be quiet. We're gonna start. Oh my god, it's so exciting. Well, in the back. In the back. Quiet. Okay, so it's the first thing is it's like not a great speaker system. So if people are talking, it doesn't really work. So just the first thing. And the second thing is this always happens, and I guarantee you're not going to be able to hear if you're in the back. So if you come here or here or here, so people over here should come up because you're not going to be able to hear every single time. So if you're just everyone like scoot up like 10 steps, and then you'll be able to hear and it'll be much better. Like even further. Everyone just take 10 steps. If you're there, come here. Even more. You like up here, yeah, good job. Even further. What? Yeah, come over here. Like, and here too, you can squeeze around the back. You'll be able to hear much better. And if you do have the urge to need to talk, just like go downstairs and it'll be better because there are people that want to try and listen. So if you want to talk, that's totally fine, but just like go downstairs and then come up when you're done. Okay, that's all for that. And then thank you guys all for coming. It's great to have such a great crowd. And this is DeSciNYC. We have the pictures by David, and he'll post them on the Twitter and on the Instagram in a little bit, so that'll be cool. And you can see them there. So you can follow on Instagram and Twitter. I'll leave it up for like 5 seconds. I still see a couple of phones.
Is it possible to move the speaker, like, so we can see the screen? Or does it obstruct the screen?
Yeah, do you want to just bring it up?
Just like,
You want to put the speaker here? No, it should go further up.
do you want to go on this on this table here?
Yeah, that's fine. Oh, on the sofa.
Okay.
On the sofa. Just put it here. Bring it over. Put it there.
On the sofa?
Just it needs to be up. Maybe just leave it. Just leave it. Sorry.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Very
Okay,
good.
so did everyone get the picture? We want to get the picture? Okay, so so who here knows what decentralized science is? We get this question a lot. Decentralized science. Okay, just a few people. So I'm going to talk about what is decentralized science. Oh, first I'm going to talk about what DeSciNYC is. So this is DeSciNYC. We've had over 10,000 people come to a meetup in one form or another, which is wonderful. It's most of the people here. Who here is a scientist? I'm kind of curious. Oh wow, amazing. Who here is like a tech founder, founder type? Or founder or tech? Who here is curious about science? Okay. Which things did I miss? What? Hate science. Okay, so you're here to put science on trial. That's good. Okay, cool. Okay, so I was just curious. Oh, if you're curious, we do have all the talks if you want to hear it at DeSci.NYC, and this is also being live streamed out to people online, which is cool. So hello to the live stream people. We've had a lot of people. We had Brian Johnson, we had Martin Shkreli, we had Research Hub people, we had Robin Hansen, and it's a growing list, and it's just cool. So I want to talk about the things we have coming up next. We have one on AI and government, especially in New York, so you can RSVP here. And it's by this guy named Alex Bors, and he is an assembly member in New York, and he's been introducing some regulation in New York around AI, and he's going to talk about that, so that'll be really interesting. Did everyone get that? Okay, I'll leave it for 2 more seconds. Okay, we'll send it out if 2. And then we have another one on nutrient transport and cell metabolism. And this is by a postdoc, Dr. Kenny, who's at Rockefeller University, and he's doing a postdoc there. And it's going to be really, really interesting. And if you want to RSVP for that one, here's the link to do so. A couple more people with their phones. Okay. Okay, so what is decentralized science? Now I will answer this question. So a lot of people have done research in like a university setting, and you might have realized that when you do research in a university setting, it's sort of very insular, right? So that only happens to people, like the only things that people talk about are the things that like academics care about. And so it takes a long, long time for research to escape that. And it's controlled by a select few, and like the funding is only done by people who are in government. So decentralized science tries to say, like, wouldn't it be interesting if instead of science being funded by the government and science being done by just a select few number of people, what if instead like you democratized it and sort of made like a Wikipedia or like a Bitcoin equivalent for a university or a scientific research? So that's what decentralized science is about. Now that's like the goal, and you might have questions like what are some specific things that make decentralized research different from traditional research? One is the way science is validated. So the typical way that science is done is it goes through something called like peer review. So you submit your paper to Nature or some journal, and you have 3 readers who read over the paper and sort of rate it on a scale of 0 to 5 of if it should be accepted, and then it's like accepted or rejected based on that. Now the problem with that is like the reader or the reviewer has absolutely no incentive to do a great job at validating the research, because they don't make or lose any credibility or money if they're correct or if they're incorrect. So one of the things that happens in decentralized science is that you have people who want to bet on scientific research. So instead of just saying like, let's give you an example. Let's look at how many people here have used Polymarket. So Polymarket is like what people were using in the election, right? So instead of going to CNN or Fox News, depending on your political beliefs, you go to Polymarket, and what made Polymarket really cool is that if you were correct in thinking about who's going to win the election, you actually could earn money, and that's like really neat. So we want to use the same ideas in science. So if you think a hypothesis is going to validate or not, you can actually earn money or lose money too. And the goal here is not to earn or lose money, but to have people be more careful when they're assessing science. So one of the things that we're conducting a study on is sleep, because sleep is like one of the most important things people can do to live longer. Brian Johnson talks about it as it helps repair muscles, it helps support the immune system, you can detoxify the brain, it has cognitive enhancements as well. So if you don't get enough sleep, for me, I feel clouded and I can't think straight, not exactly, but it definitely helps to get more sleep. And also if you're trying to live a long life, the sleep helps to give your body a chance to repair. So I was looking at some of this research that happened, some of these people that have been doing sleep research using wearables and like Sleep 8 and Whoop. So I don't know if you saw this tweet, but during the OpenAI drama, the founder of Sleep 8, which is like a bed that sort of cools itself, tweeted that people are sleeping a lot less during the drama of OpenAI when Sam Altman was fired because of all the tension. And he noticed a downgrade in people's sleep during this. And I thought this was really interesting because this is like a distributed trial that he's running, and he's able to just look at the data and figure out these sort of interesting characteristics. And then more recently, Whoop came out with a paper that looked at how exercise near bedtime affects people's sleep quality. So they found, and this was published in Nature, and this was cool because this was one of these new types of studies that are done outside of the lab and allow people to participate, and you sort of can validate science in a very new way. So what we're doing is we're doing a new style of sleep studies, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it, how it works. So we wrote some software that works with any wearable. So it works with Whoop, Oura Ring, your just phone, and normalizes those scores across different devices. So this is kind of cool because now people can compare the Whoop to the Oura to the Sleep 8 to just having a phone, and you can generate a sleep score that should be somewhat normalized so that they can be compared. And then we give people crypto to encourage people to participate in the trial. We give people crypto tokens for how many hours that they sleep and if they answer questions at the end. And the idea is they have equity in this data set. So now the people that participate are actually incentivized in some way by linking them to the final outcome of the study. So you can track patterns, you notice patterns, you earn crypto as you sleep. There's actually a lot of people in the audience who are on the app already, which is kind of cool. I see some familiar faces who are some of the top sleepers in New York and globally, which is the first ever sleep influencers, which is kind of funny. But I think this is going to be a thing. I think we're going to have people competing on biomarkers. And what's really, really cool actually is when you have thousands of people on the app, you can do research 1,000 in parallel. So you can do research almost 1,000 times more quickly than sort of a serial, more general study. It's much, sitting and seeing the data come in, it's actually quite fascinating. So we have the best sleeper, and we're trying to figure out what impacting sleep in a validated model, and giving people an incentive to participate by issuing these tokens, which will, if someone writes a paper, they can get their name on the paper, they can get equity in the data set if it's sold, all sorts of things. But this is sort of like what is decentralized science, where you're using tokenomics and blockchain to incentivize the creation of science. So currently we're doing a study on sleep masks and mouth tape and red light glasses and magnesium to figure out the effects that each of these things have, or if it's n equals 1, if things just matter for each individual person, or if there's some collective learning that can happen. And then one of the more interesting things is based on how much tokens you earn, you can then use those tokens to bet on things like, do men sleep better than women? Do New York sleep better than San Francisco? And you can start to play with these tokens and incentivize people to use them for having utility around them. One of the things we found already in this is that people's sleep score seems to decrease by 1.2 points based on the number of hours that they ate before bed. So this is a very preliminary finding, but I think it's cool that we're actually starting to generate data and generate findings that are new. And obviously this is just the beginning, but I think it's cool to show that we are generating data and finding interesting things. Some of the other things is this allows for much more nimble things. You can just look at the data and see it. You don't have to care. It's you're just starting up a GitHub project. You don't have to write a research proposal and get it approved by a million committees. Science here feels much more nimble. So ultimately, I think the goal is we want to be able to figure out longevity and have markets around each person. So you could have a prediction market based on people's wearables and biomarkers to be able to predict the outcome of how long they're going to live, so that you can accurately predict which types of interventions people should do to increase their lifespan. Some things. This is Stadium Science. If you're interested to download the app and participate in the first ever sleep clinical trial, you can download it here. Oh, lots of phones, amazing. If you want a job, that's the second one. We are hiring. We have a great coding team now. We have a great design team. If you are a business development type person and are very good at that, we are looking for a very talented person in that respect as well. So that's the second one. The third one is if you're an Android user like myself, we just released a version, but it's still in the App Store thing. If you want to get access to it, we can send you a code to do that. You can follow us at Stadium Science on Stadium_Science on Twitter. Our website is stadium.science. Does anyone have any questions around decentralized science or sleep or DeSciNYC? Yes. You can just shout it, it's fine.
Yeah, no worries. How long has the token been out for?
There's no token now, it's just points, but people are acquiring the points, and it's around a month.
You will to be in 1 month, basically.
or we've had it for a month, and TG, I don't know when it's gonna happen.
I see.
Yeah.
Understood. I guess one general question is, and then we can state this offline, but like, I guess for those of us in the audience who have crypto backgrounds, how do you address the fundamental self-factor that always comes from the fact that you're rewarding people like tokens in the tokenomics?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of it's going to be transparent so that you'll be able to see, if you suspect someone is biased, that will be available to see, whereas in a normal paper, you can't even see that at all. So any data that's extrapolated out from this data set should be looked at more carefully, either by a human or by an AI. And so I think different people are going to analyze the data differently. Like 2 different sets of eyes could analyze the same data set and come to 2 separate conclusions. But if that data is all available and has provenance to it, then you can actually figure out which type of, you might be able to figure out who's been biased and either include or exclude them from your research. Yeah, go ahead.
So who will pay for this?
What was it?
Who will pay for it? What's the demand side?
I think a lot of people would pay for it. So, I mean, one is people that want to do research, people that want to validate a model for like sleep studies. So like Sleep 8 or Aura or something might be interested in purchasing this data set. OpenAI might be interested in purchasing this data set to fine tune their model for health data. Maybe people in New York looking to figure out when people wake up so that they could, give them coffee or something. All sorts of, I think there's many different avenues. Yeah.
How much would that work?
I don't know yet. That's still be determined. Yeah. Okay, one more. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I have a question. How do you control for placebo effect, and how do you set up a control group for this sort of study?
Well, I mean, it's all tracked using like a wearable, so Whoop or Oura Ring, and like that's a pretty hard thing to fake, like getting how much REM you're going to get, or I mean, so. There are ways. I don't think that's our first order priority, but you could have people who opt in, take a pill that they don't know, and they don't know if it's magnesium or if it's a placebo. And so, like, 2 people get an envelope and they put in a pill into an envelope that is known to be a placebo and one that is known to be not a placebo, and each one has a QR code on it. They scan all the ones that have the placebo. They scan all the ones that don't have that are the actual thing. They put those in a bag, shuffle it up, scan the thing that they take it, and that's a way to do like a self-administered blind study. So you could control for that. It's not something I'm super concerned about right now, though.
So, for example, like exercise and sleep, if you administer to just general public, and well, they probably have a preconceived notion of whether or not exercise before bedtime will help or will disrupt my sleep. And those sort of, in fact, I guess would be really hard to control in this case.
Yeah, I mean, for exercise, that's a really hard one to control for doing a blind study. I mean, there was a recent one on ketamine for depression, and like the reason that didn't pass the trial is because like people were obvious on if they were taking ketamine or not. I'm not so concerned about that immediately, but maybe we'll address it later. I don't think it's like a top priority. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you have enough data to show whether or not daylight savings hampers or is better?
Not yet, because we just started this after that happened. But I think that is cool. You could do that study, right? So I didn't think of that study, you did, right? And that's really neat because now you can just like propose that study. We have like a Reddit. I didn't show it, but we have like a Reddit style experiment list where people can upvote and downvote things for people to gain things, and then the ones that pass a certain criteria get deployed onto the test bed. Yeah.
Could you do something with the congestion pricing?
Congestion pricing?
Yeah, I
How?
want to see if that made a difference.
Oh, what do you
Do
mean?
you have enough data?
For how does
Like,
congestion
if you sleep
pricing affect
better
sleep?
With less cards.
Oh yeah, exactly. So there's another example that's the power of crowdsourcing, right? So I didn't think of that, but you could definitely do it, right? You could say, we get people opt into giving their broad location. It's not super precise, but we know where people are located. So we could tell if people are located in a congestion area and then do that type of study. How does congestion pricing affect sleep? Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit about, like a few sentences about the privacy? Can I share this with my friends in Europe?
Yeah, definitely. So we use Nillion Compute, which is like an MCP compute, where it's encrypted on the device and then sent and then stored, and then the data is stored. The data is computed over the back of that, which is so it keeps it private. There's also a lot of features in there to make your data public or private, depending on what you want. Yeah. People in the back. Shh. Go ahead. Okay. Any more? 3, 2, 1. Okay. Without further ado, guys, people in the back, we can actually hear. And we're gonna take it over to Alex, who I met we were at Stanford together, and we studied computer science. I studied computer science, and he studied bioinformatics, sorry. And very interesting guy. He has an intense background in both research and in medicine. So we are very proud to have him. Give him a round of applause. Let everyone smile. 3, one more. One more. Focusing. Okay. Sweet. Okay.
Okay, excellent. Well, listen, thank you so much, Mikey. So Mikey and I lived across the street from each other when we were in graduate school, and it's such a big pleasure to reconnect. Especially, oh, you can't hear? Closer to the mic? Okay, perfect.
In the back.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, so Mikey and I lived across the street from each other in graduate school in California. It's a big pleasure to be here to reconnect. And so today I'm going to be talking about biomarkers for longevity. And I come here knowing that Brian Johnson has recently given a talk here at DeSci. And so I'll just preface by saying I'm no Brian Johnson, but I hope nonetheless you love the talk and you get a lot out of it. Because I'm a physician, I have to give you disclosures, otherwise I'll lose my license. So I have some equity in a biomarker company called Liquid Cell from my PhD thesis, and I have a venture capital firm called September. So I want to start the talk by talking about age. And when I was researching for this talk, I came across kind of a striking statistic, which is that age is probably, more than any single thing, the greatest marker and predictor of mortality at any given time. I thought that was very striking. And so age is very salient in 2 periods of your life. The first is on the day that you're born. Infant mortality, even though it's 2025, remains a huge source of mortality globally, developing world, developed world, across everything. So you have a high chance of dying on the day that you're born, but if you make it, you end up in kind of this valley of safety. But then age creeps up on you again. And as you get older, your mortality on any given day is actually really governed by age. And age is very strongly correlated with that mortality. This is data from Sweden, where they kept records in the 1800s. And remarkably, as you might expect, this curve of mortality versus age goes southward. It drips down over time as we improved, public health, sanitation, as doctors started washing their hands, some still don't, and as we kind of developed medical technology over time. I thought that was very striking. At the same time, we all know that life expectancy has increased, and in kind of the modern industrial era, it's increased in a sigmoidal fashion. I want to just give some further context by going all the way back to ancient times. And we kind of had this linear increase up into the medieval plateau, I'll call it, and then into our industrial sigmoid function. But how did this sigmoidal climb happen? Well, it turns out around the inflection point, we had things like public health, we had infrastructure, we had vaccination, we had sanitation, and that gave rise to this increased slope in the industrial era in the developed world. We then had, kind of in the early 1900s, post-World War II, or around World War II, we had modern antibiotics, we had penicillin, and then further, we had kind of these modern therapeutics that further boosted longevity. Then kind of in the 70s, and then a bit further, we started to tackle chronic diseases. We got better at diabetes, we got better at tackling heart disease, we got better at cancers. Breast cancer is one that really comes to mind, especially me as a cancer doctor, I'm very excited about. And we've done a tremendous job doing that. But here we are in 2025, and there's something very sad that's happened, which is that there's a stagnation. And this is, kind of as a physician, heart disease, as someone got better at cancer. Oh, sorry, there's a bit of feedback. Okay. So there's a little bit of stagnation in 2025. And so things are really stagnated. And then kind of like with everything, America really potentiates global trends. And so in America in particular, life expectancy has really plateaued and has even decreased. You might notice that there's a blip there. You might imagine that's from the COVID pandemic, but even without the COVID pandemic, life expectancy has really started to plateau in the US especially. What's even more concerning is health span. And so those of you who were at Brian Johnson's talk will probably know health span is this measure that takes into account lifespan and also the years of life lived free from disease, from disability, and from suffering, and is a key metric. The problem is that health span has not only not really increased, it's actually started to contract, especially in America. America has an unfortunate distinction of leading the world in the gap between life expectancy and health span, meaning that health span is really lagging life expectancy, particularly in the US. And it's a bit small on the slide, but the United States is highlighted as kind of the top point in this graph, unfortunately, from this wonderful JAMA paper that I found. And then the other unfortunate thing is that the graph on the right shows that health span, lifespan gap in the United States is increasing over time. So health span in America is contracting. So I want to ask you, how should we think about the measurement of health? Well, to do that, I want to add some context and go back in time. Let's go all the way back to 400 BC, where life expectancy in ancient Greece was about 25 years, live fast and die young. And Hippocrates was writing his aphorisms. And so aphorism number 44 just happens to be, people who might be a little bit overweight, they tend to not do as well in terms of longevity than other people. And so kind of this is one of the first times that somebody talked about a marker of longevity that I could really find. And it turns out you can tell a lot about health before you even do invasive testing like blood tests. This is a sculpture by Myron here depicting an Olympian, and even Hippocrates himself would know that this Olympian has a lot of life left to live compared to somebody who's pale, who's kind of in bed and kind of sick and bedridden. You can even just tell from the vibe of these two pictures. Oh yeah, like this? Yeah, you can even tell from these two pictures, there's a huge delta between them. In the medical community, we have a term, especially when a physician doesn't want to examine a patient. I'm not endorsing not examining a patient, but a doctor might say, looks good from the door. LGFD, they might write that in their note. And certainly the picture on the left looks much better from the door than the picture on the right. And you kind of just get this vibe. So, but how can we really quantify this vibe about lifespan? So, starting in the Renaissance era, there's this guy, Santorio, and he wrote a book called De Statistica Medicina. In it, he was kind of like a Renaissance era Brian Johnson. He was weighing himself every single day. He was tracking all the food that he was eating. He was measuring like how much he perspired, called an insensible loss. And he's trying to correlate these against his healthcare outcomes. And so I thought that was very fascinating. Then there's this guy called Quindlay, who actually invented the body mass index. And then Ansel Keys renamed it to its current name of BMI in the 70s. And this is another example of an early biomarker that was made. Finally, in 1969, this is one of the seminal papers, or first times that somebody wanted to make a measure of how fast a human would age. And they picked up on many different metrics. Some of them we know very well today, like hand grip strength, which we continue to use, blood pressures, which are certainly very validated. We use cholesterol, and then something called the vibrometer. I can't imagine what it does. Maybe it measures vibes. I'm not sure. But vibes, visible and invisible, we quantify them. This gut feeling that we have when we see a patient as a physician, or when you feel something yourself, we quantify them using a biomarker. And so what is a biomarker? A biomarker is a measurable indicator of a biological state. They help us to understand and measure age, health, and longevity itself. Now, a little bit about me. How did I come to study biomarkers? Well, when I was doing my PhD, I became very excited about bioinformatics and about cancer. There was a tremendous amount of activity happening in cancer during the time of my graduate studies. Around that time, immunotherapy was really, bursting onto the scene and very popularized. Immunotherapy for skin cancer won the Nobel Prize in 2018. And it turns out that people who have metastatic melanoma, metastatic skin cancer, about 50% of them will have a dramatic response with immunotherapy, whereas in the past, it would have been a death sentence. But it's a double-edged sword because immunotherapy seeks to unleash the immune system against the cancer, but it can also mediate an autoimmune attack against your own body, sending about half of patients to hospital, and even in some cases, it can cause death. So in my graduate studies, we profiled the blood of patients before they got immunotherapy, and we found cell phenotypes, or types of cells, that are very abundant in patients, and we figured out which of the patients, based on their cell phenotype makeup from this blood test, would go on to have a severe immune-related adverse event. And so this is our AUC from the validation cohort. And it was a big pleasure to do this, and I continued my interest in cancer. I finished medical school, and then I'm actually just finishing my internal medicine residency imminently and starting my oncology fellowship any second now. Back to the germane topic of this talk is age. So part of aging is this genetic program of development, and another is the accumulated of substances, experiences that we are exposed to during our lives. I want to ask you, can you guess somebody's age just by looking at them? And can we fit to age using parameters that we find in a blood test? This next slide demonstrates a very important paradigm in the field of longevity science. So what a lot of researchers in this field do for the past 15 years or so is they take all the patients' chronological ages in a cohort. We call it a training cohort. Then they do something like a blood test. They have multi-parameter blood tests with tons of data and information, and they figure out, for each given age of a patient, what are the parameters in that blood test? They then fit a model. In the old days, it was statistical learning. You might have run it in R and Python. In these new days, you can run an LLM, you can do deep learning on it, and you're kind of fitting a model to figure out how you can predict age from a blood test and from biomarkers. You then go ahead and you plot chronological age, the age that shows on your passport or your driver's license, against a biomarker predicted age. Then the next thing, and this is the key step, is that we create a biomarker age gap. And I want to really hammer this home because the rest of the talk is really predicated on this, and it's a fundamental concept in longevity science. We calculate a delta between the chronological age and the biomarker age. And so it turns out that if you have a positive biomarker age gap, you're going to be predicted to be younger than you actually are. And if you have this negative biomarker age gap, you might be predicted to be older than you actually are. And when a relative or somebody you know is telling you, oh, I'm actually, my blood is younger than my actual age, and they've done a blood test from an insurance company or something like that, this is what they're referencing, more or less. So let's go into our first academic paper. So this is a really wonderful Nature Medicine paper that came out 2 years ago now. And in this one, they profiled the blood of tons of patients in the UK Biobank data set, thousands of patients, and they had an ensemble of proteins that they did feature selection on, and they fit a machine learning or AI model on to predict age using protein. In this, their biomarker is called protein age, PROT-age, and their biomarker age gap is called the protein age gap. The plot on the left is the UK Biobank showing their protein age plotted against age in the cohort, and they show a very tight fit. The Pearson correlation is 0.94, and this is their test set. But the thing that's remarkable is that although this was trained in the UK, they profiled the blood of a Chinese data set, and they got an extremely tight fit in a kind of a blinded test set, and a Pearson correlation coefficient as well of 0.92. And so even geographically, culturally, genetic or ethnically different groups, they actually were able to fit age in kind of a blinded, unbiased way in a training and test cohort. And so what's the big deal? What can you do with this protein age? Well, it turns out that if you kind of have a very unfavorable protein age gap, it turns out that you rate your own health very poorly. You have a slower walking pace. You have a worse self-rated facial aging. And then on the other hand, if you have a very favorable protein age gap, your hand grip strength is very strong, you have better lung function, and you actually have better fluid intelligence. So I found that to be quite fascinating. But where do we go from here? So we can actually measure just really a ton of things. And so we can measure, physical characteristics like weight, height, BMI, etc. We can measure things with things like our Apple Watch and our wearables. We can do MRIs on the brain. We can do things like VO2 max and heart rate variability, which some of you are probably measuring right now as we speak. We can also look at molecular markers, and that's kind of the area that I focused on in my PhD. You can look at protein, like the paper I just showed you. You can look at the transcriptome, like mRNA sequencing. You can look at epigenetics, like methylation data. And you can look at the metabolome as well. I want to next show you a paper from the epigenetics area. This is one of the seminal papers in longevity. And anyone in longevity who's an expert in this room probably has read this. This is kind of the Horvath biological aging clock. And this is a 2013 paper, and here the biomarker was methylation data. So the epigenome, how do your genetics change over time through nurture rather than kind of nature? And their biomarker age is called the methylation age. With that exact same paradigm, this like fitting the age and the age gap, here on the left we have the training set of fitting age, and on the right we have their testing set. And they actually had excellent results in a held out blinded testing set to predict age based on their machine learning model. One of the great things about this is that you can, if you happen to have your methylation data, or you're able to get it, you can upload your methylation data to their website, screenshot is here, and you can figure out your own methylation age. And I thought that was totally fascinating. So if you have a genetic sequencer lying around, you can go ahead and do this. Another thing that I loved about this paper, and I thought that was very provocative, is that you can actually probe methylation age from each tissue in each specific organ. I think this is very clever. So you can probe the methylation age of your liver, of your lung, of your kidney, of your brain. I will note some of the tissue sites are a bit underpowered, and the muscle one doesn't really work, but I think that age per organ system is very provocative and kind of generated a lot of thoughts in my own mind. And then, what's the big deal? Well, it turns out that people have continued to study this methylation clock and have benchmarked it against other methylation measures. And this is a JAMA article that came out in the last 2 years. And it turns out that epigenetic age certainly does, in independent researchers, independent cohorts, correlate with longevity, mobility, and cognitive function. So, there's this hypothesis that this stuff actually really matters and really works, has real world bearings and outcomes. So another question I want to pose is, are there multiple dimensions to age? And so I made this little schematic here, but I kind of started to read these papers and then think, might there be an age for your cardiovascular system? And I'll plot it on one axis here. For those of you who've taken linear algebra, this will kind of ring true. And then there might be like a metabolic age that you might have for your metabolic system. There might be a neurological age for your nervous system as well. And then I'm kind of constrained by a two-dimensional slide here, but there might even be more axes or more interactions, like with genetics. There might be interactions with the environment as well. And then you might imagine that the diseases that you end up having are kind of like a projection upon these axes. It's the makeup of all the ages and all of the vulnerabilities in all of your major organ systems and their interactions with the environment and your genetics. So heart disease might be a component of cardiovascular, metabolic, and then a tiny bit of neurological as well. You might have emphysema or COPD be a component of these things. You might have cancer be a component of them, autoimmune disease, neurodegeneration, and stroke, just to name a few examples. I want to just loop back just very quickly to the protein age paper, because in their supplementary material, there's a very provocative figure. And what they found is that for protein age, they're actually able to stratify patients who had kind of low protein age gap, so very favorable age gap in green, all the way to poor protein age gap, unfavorable in blue. And it turns out if you have a very poor protein age, meaning that the protein age that by your blood is much worse than your chronological age, you're much more likely to have a chronic disease. And this can be autoimmune, like rheumatoid arthritis. It can be a type of cancer. It can be heart disease. It can even be a stroke. And I found that to be totally fascinating. So another question I have is, do biomarkers generally hold across ethnic, cultural, and geographic differences? And we saw in the protein age paper that they trained in the UK and they validated in China. This other paper said kind of similar things. They looked in Canada, Korea, and Eastern Europe, and they found kind of the same thing, that things really do work. We have a lot more in common than we have different, but they did do some fine-tuning across all the populations. And so I thought that was interesting as well. So I actually did the final internal medicine call shift of my life overnight on, I think it was like Saturday night. It's all really a blur, but I kind of slept at 10 a.m. and I woke up at a time, and I'm ashamed to say I was on my phone in my bed. I don't want to admit it, but I opened Twitter, and because I was preparing for this talk, I saw kind of a very apropos tweet from Chamath Palihapitiya. And in that tweet, he kind of goes into discuss how, he's been tracking his VO2 max with his Whoop, his heart rate variability, and these metrics have kind of gotten worse over time for him, apparently. But at the same time, although his metrics have gotten worse, he's had an amazing life the past few months. He's drank incredible wine, he's spent time with his wife, with his children, he's played poker with his friends. And so, it was kind of interesting, what's the point of all these markers, and do they really matter to the average consumer? So Kevin here weighed in and actually had an interesting opinion. Kevin says that body fat, LDL, like your cholesterol, and blood pressure are much better validated than HRV, heart rate variability, and some of these other metrics. Brian Johnson, the GOAT, of course, chimed in here and said to Chamath, let's just focus on a few key things and do one thing at a time. I think very sage advice from Brian Johnson here. Eric says, I actually don't trust this stuff at all. Chadan says, I extol the virtues of lifting. Very reasonable. Daniel says we're measuring way too much stuff. Reasonable as well. But Will chimed in as well. And Will actually happens to be the CEO of Whoop. And this is actually very fortuitous and very fortunate for me because I happened to be giving this talk and Will decided to release Whoop's health span feature on May 8th, just in time for DeSci. And so Whoop's health span feature gives you kind of your estimated age, and then it gives you this delta age as well, how much younger you are than your chronological age based on all of the metrics that Whoop kind of aggregates. And so I don't have all the specifics on how it works underneath the hood, but it does aggregate these things. It puts them into a machine learning model. It'll aggregate like your age, your weight, VO2 max, how much you're exercising, and all those sorts of things, and kind of give you this Whoop biological age. And for those of you who have the latest edition of Whoop, you can actually find this, and you can figure out kind of these metrics and look further into your health span. So I think that's totally fascinating. As you know, there's tons of consumer wearables that are out here. I won't go too deep into them, and I'll keep it more academic. And then, harkening back to Brian Johnson, you can even buy Johnson's blueprint, system, and you can measure your age per his company with some blood tests that they offer as well. So there's a ton really on the consumer side. But I want to bring it back to biomarkers and AI, just to kind of round things off. So I wonder, how will AI and large language models act as biomarkers, and how will they allow us to understand and even extend longevity? The first paper I want to just quickly touch upon, and I think this field's a little bit immature, but that researchers are actually looking at MRI images with deep learning to scan your brain and kind of give you an age on the basis of your brain. So there's a lot of activity in this field. It turns out that your brain age is very correlated with mortality, but there's kind of mixed data so far on if it's correlated with your cognitive function. So I think probably a lot of potential there, and I'm going to be watching it very closely, but very early for that. This is one of my favorite papers that I came across. So this, again, came out just now. It's just breaking. It's May 8th, and this is from a bunch of cancer doctors, and this is very near and dear to my heart. These scientists here and these doctors, they actually trained on a data set of publicly available face data to predict how old you are on the basis of what your face looks like. And these are just healthy patients. Then what they did is they had cancer patients from the Netherlands and from Boston. They had lung cancer, they had other types of cancer, and they applied their facial recognition or facial age AI algorithm to the cancer patients to figure out, a face age of them. The thing that's striking is that facial age actually can predict overall survival. And for those of you who are familiar with Kaplan-Meier curves, it turns out that the older your face age score is, the less long you have to live, unfortunately. But the interesting thing is that it can really stratify people, and significantly so. They achieve statistical significance with just this AI algorithm. It turns out that your facial age in a cancer patient is more predictive of survival than actually your true chronological age. And I thought that was extremely fascinating, and that's kind of borne out in this forest plot on the right. One thing that was interesting as a side is that it can actually predict who's a smoker and who's not. It turns out that your facial age AI score is really correlated with your smoking status, and significantly so. And then as a physician myself, I was a bit sad to see this, but also really not surprised at all. It turns out that facial age is actually incredibly good at figuring out your survival at 6 months from when it does the prediction. The area under the curve, or kind of an accuracy score, is 0.8 for 6 months survival predicted by the facial age AI algorithm. For doctors on their own, without any assistance, it turns out that it's much worse. It's 0.6. So doctors, it's like flipping a coin to figure out who's going to survive at 6 months. For doctors who have the patient's physical chart, the electronic health record with them, it's much better. They get a lot more data. And then doctors who have the facial age score and have their own clinical judgment and the chart, they perform as well as the facial age score. But we've seen this time and time again, where actually an AI algorithm trained very well and precisely is very good at predicting clinical outcomes. And unfortunately, physicians with algorithms together, they're actually not often able to beat an AI algorithm at predicting outcomes, even when doctors have assistive AI at their disposal. So, super curious, maybe not the best news for doctors like me in my shoes, but as a scientist, totally fascinating. I want to draw your attention to kind of one final paper, and this is more in the nebulous, cutting edge part, and this one actually is only in bioRxiv. It's not in a peer-reviewed journal just yet, so everything with a grain of salt, but in this one, the authors read the electronic medical record, they used AI to read the electronic medical record and then predict age from reading a patient's chart. All the notes that doctors, nurses, dietitians, PT, OT, everyone writes about a patient. They had the AI read the notes and figure out the age. The correlations are pretty good, like the Pearsons are 0.75 and so, and very significant. But I think the thing that was the most striking is that the AI is really able to very strongly risk stratify patients and predict overall survival. And this is another very striking, significant Kaplan-Meier curve showing how just the AI trained on the electronic medical record is able to stratify patients. The authors then went on to make an omic age, which is really multimodality, and it's AI trained on proteins, metabolites, and clinical variables altogether. And with that omic age, they were able to do a lot of cool things. One is that they're able to predict 10-year survival very well, and it's kind of exemplified in this AUC plot over here, an ROC plot, kind of in the yellow, and it beats out just the chronological age here in black. The EMR age actually, so the electronic medical record age by AI, does very, very well impressively. And then for the major chronic diseases, to predict who's going to have a new onset disease, so an incident disease, it does very well, especially for things like diabetes. One thing that's beyond the scope of my talk, but I thought was interesting, is that OpenAI actually is also dipping their toes into longevity science. I don't want to take up too much of your time, so I won't go into that. But I think it's just such a hot topic, and there's so much exciting work that's being done. So coming towards the end, what are really the next steps here? And I want to just as a scientist say, just because something correlates with age doesn't mean that it actually causes age. And we don't want to get into a correlation causation fallacy. But at the same time, I don't want to lose hope. And if there is real biology at play, and if that can be borne out in real experiments, biomarkers for age may actually give us hints at new therapeutic targets to actually target the processes of aging. And so I think that's totally very provocative. There's also a whole new set of startups being created in the longevity space. I'll just say, the scope of this talk is really focused on academic research, but in the private sector, there's really a tremendous amount of rigorous activity, and many of the papers I showed you actually have a startup company that's accompanying them, and you can even use some of their products today. One question I have is, how much can we actually personalize recommendations using this biomarker data? And can we actually beat what all of our mothers told us, which is just, go outside and run, eat, vegetables, and don't smoke? And one of the ways I think that biomarkers can help us personalize recommendations from a physician or from any healthcare provider is by having this multimodal approach where we can have an age per organ system to really weigh in and how can we predict the onset of a very specific disease so we can start screening for it earlier, like COPD or like diabetes, based on early warning check engine light signs in a specific domain like cardiovascular, for example. Another interesting thing is, what can we do with all of this data? And a huge need is for clinical trial endpoints. So there have been clinical trials which are actually using methylation age and some of these other age metrics as endpoints. One is a calorie restriction clinical trial. One is a trial for the drug rapamycin, and anyone who's read the book Outlive by Peter Attia, he goes into rapamycin a great deal in the introduction of the book. And another is for plasma infusion. And so all of these clinical trials registered with the NIH use these biomarker ages as an endpoint. One thing I really want to hammer home is that there's a key problem in clinical trials for most diseases right now, in that it's actually very challenging to use mortality or lifespan as an endpoint, because it's often very many decades away. People with diabetes often live for 10, 20, 30 years longer, but they're living with the side effects and the crippling aspects of diabetes. So for chronic diseases, we really need to have a way to measure the impacts on lifespan and health span immediately. I think that biomarkers are the instrumental tool that allow us to have a readout of increases in health span induced by the intervention that we're testing in any given clinical trial. And so they're absolutely key to this coming revolution. I'll just end by going back to Chamath here, and he's asking more philosophically, what am I supposed to be getting out of all these biomarkers, and what's the use of everything? Is this all just really a vibe, and is how you feel matter? Is what you look like from the door when you're examining a patient, is that more important than all of the biomarkers? I think that there's a lot of utility still to measure things, and just to come full circle, I want to talk about where we came from. So one of the great challenges of our time is that human lifespan has really stopped increasing. This is devastating. We've stopped living longer as a population average. Furthermore, health span has actually contracted. And I'll just harken back to this plot of the health span lifespan gap increasing in America, meaning our health span has contracted. But within this data lies opportunity. There are key areas where health span is very low and the gap is greatest. And these are driven, and I know the text is very small, by things like mental health, substance abuse disorders, respiratory disease like emphysema, neurodegeneration like Alzheimer's, and cardiovascular disease. These represent key challenges, but also key opportunities for therapeutics, and opportunities where we can measure the outcomes of therapeutics instantaneously with biomarkers. I want to go back to this plot about stagnation. And so, the increase in lifespan from ancient times was really the product of human innovation in therapeutics, public health, infrastructure, sanitation, and even diplomatic efforts for peace. We stand now in 2025 at a time of life expectancy stagnation and health span contraction. And it's incumbent upon us, all of us in this room here, as innovators, scientists, doctors, and patients alike, to accept the baton passed to us by our ancestors and increase health span for our own generation and for generations to come. I think in the dawn of the LLM era, we might be able to enter out of an age of stagnation into an age of health abundance, using the new tools at our disposal. And there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for us to make a real difference in this urgent need area. So biomarkers will allow us to not only measure our own progress in our own health journey with consumables and wearables, but also the progress in the critical human endeavor of increasing health and lifespan altogether. Thank you so much. All right. Yeah, go ahead.
Are you familiar with the Dune and Pace test?
Wait, there's people who are put your hand on the mic and then now.
Oh, they speak with the mic?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Okay. And then you can pass it to them. Yeah.
Okay.
Are you familiar with the Dune and Pace test?
Yeah, I saw it. I didn't.
Yeah.
Oh, and I take it back. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. Sorry, I'm new at this. So,
Repeat the question.
yeah, am I familiar with the Dune and Base test?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
You define it. Can you define what it is for us?
Yeah,
No, really hold it close.
Oh, sorry, guys. Okay. Okay. Excellent. I saw it preparing for this talk, but I didn't go into a ton of detail, so I won't kind of speak out of my depth on that one. But I know it's one of the very promising, tests for health span and longevity as well. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
What's the test?
The Dune and Base test. It's another, competing test. I forget which modality it interrogates, but another promising, exciting test for health span.
They have a leaderboard, and I think Brian Johnson's number one. But you have to do the test sequentially, 3 times over 6 months to be number one on the leaderboard, or top 10.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah. So for those of you in here, they have a leaderboard, and you can figure out who's the top one, and Brian Johnson's the top on the leaderboard. So I think that's quite fascinating. I guess yes. I'll give the mic to someone who hasn't spoken yet. None of you guys have spoken. Can you pass it to the lady just over your right shoulder?
Hi. Go Trees. I went to Stanford.
Let's go.
I don't know how I did not come across you when I was living in Escondido Village.
Okay.
If you were also living there. But I have a question. Do you know if any biomarkers seem relevant for health disparities? My geriatrician physician friend is asking.
Yeah. I guess I'll grab it.
How can she
there's
get
a
in
second.
contact with you?
It's such a good question, and I didn't pick up on a specific one, but we do know that there's methylation outcomes from living in poverty. Poverty actually changes your methylome. The toxicities in the air, the stress of being in poverty, all these certain things kind of weigh upon us in our genetics. I didn't come across on a specific biomarker for health disparity, but I can imagine if you go back and reanalyze some of these cohorts and some of the data, you will be able to find something. I'm sure you will. In geriatrics, I've done a geriatric rotation, and I work, primarily with adults probably over 70, to be honest. The median age of my patients is probably 65, and it breaks my heart to see, patients from impoverished backgrounds. And so I think that they deserve access to these health span biomarkers all the same. And so I think a key challenge for us is to be able to distribute this good to all sorts of populations. So I don't have an exact answer for you, but you might imagine that reanalyzing some of this data stratified by income level, I think there will be signal there. I really do.
Okay,
Thank you.
So great talk, but I think the question that I have, and it's more of a comment, isn't this whole idea behind biomarkers and endpoints only dependent on where the science is currently? So my understanding is you're an oncologist, I'm an oncologist, and we know that even surrogate endpoints like PFS, when it comes to things like immune therapy, don't do as well, and nobody would dispute that immune therapy isn't beneficial. So as science advances, isn't it feasible to say that the current biomarkers and what they show and the current endpoints that we use easily going to get replaced? So do we, and I know a lot of private companies are putting a lot of money and stock into some of these things by saying, well, this is absolutely hard science. It's hard science today till the science actually changes, and then it's yesterday.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent comment, and you're an oncologist with a lot more experience than I have, but I think it really rings true. And I think part of biomarkers is, we're looking under the lamppost and we're examining things that we can actually measure. And so we have this paradigm of, biomarker age, but this may not be the paradigm actually forever. And so that might change. And then, there's a huge financial incentive to show that an endpoint changes, that the p-value is different, or that the box plot of group A is different than the box plot of group B when you stratify by a key biomarker. And I agree, the goalposts may very well change over time. And I think one of the key, most critical questions is, are these biomarkers going to actually translate into benefits in quality adjusted life years, into real health span, however you want to measure it, by having a better, longer, more symptom-free life? Those are the major questions, and some of those questions require years to kind of really bear out in the data. And I do think that the goalposts will move over time as we become, more expert in this field, as AI is better and we have more access to data. But I think it's a great comment, and yeah, thanks for the comment. I appreciate it.
Does that which does not kill you make you stronger?
Kanye is canceled is the first thing I'll say. So shouldn't have even said his name. But what I would say is, I really think so. I think it's very disease dependent, and so it turns out that if you have damage to a certain organ, like to your lungs or to your heart and things like that, you do get weaker each time you come back into the hospital. And so I actually think you can probably capture that with certain biomarkers. Certainly we can see it, in our heart failure patients with their BNP marker over time. It's kind of climbing, and other markers like that. But I like to think, maybe I'm just young and idealistic, that psychologically or mentally we become more robust over time. But yeah, I think very provocative statement. Thank you.
And then we'll get you next. Just don't bump the camera.
Great talk. Thanks for that. U.S. has way worse health outcomes despite way higher spend than most other Western countries. What would you say are the main causes for that, and what would you suggest on a policy level what to do to improve that situation?
Thank you so much for the question. I think that's an incredibly enormous question and a fantastic question. I was born in Canada, and I have dual citizenship with Spain and Canada. So, but I did go to school in America, where I met Mikey. So I think the thing I'll say is that, oh gosh, it's such an important question, and I'm not a healthcare economist. Let me say it from a doctor's point of view. I think doctors, nurses, dietitians, PTs, and OTs, there are so many people, the patients themselves, patient advocates, so many good people out there who want to make a real difference for patients, want to do a lot of real good and help the people in front of them. I think that things have gotten more stressful. Billing has gotten very convoluted and complicated. There's many models across the world that work more efficiently and work better. I think anything that we can do to reduce overhead, reduce administration, reduce the complexity of billing, reduce the complexity of seeing patients on the healthcare provider point of view will reduce our burnout and make us more adept at fostering good healthcare outcomes. But I think it's an enormous question, and I thank you for it. I probably am not equipped from an economist point of view just today, but I really appreciate the question. It's a huge question for America.
So my question is, in regards to blue zones, has there been any thought to studying the biomarkers of people that live in these areas in terms of longevity, and what are your thoughts on that?
So, I think it's a fantastic question. My ancestors are all from the Mediterranean, and I tell all of my patients, it doesn't even matter what you have. If you kind of walk in and you see me and we spend enough time together, I'm going to tell you the Mediterranean diet is what you should be on, no matter what. And so I think in terms of the blue zones, I actually would like to study, these populations, and I'd like to know what their methylome looks like, what the proteins look like in their blood. I think that would be very curious. Something I'll say is that not everybody, in Spain or in Japan is a paragon of health, and they're still smoking and things like that as well. But I would be very curious what the blood looks like in those areas and what the biomarkers look like. And actually, is there an interaction with culture as well? Is there something about family, about community, about having a siesta once a day that really, potentiates healthcare outcomes? I'd love to know the answer to that. I don't have an answer today, but I'm, very curious about that too.
Thanks for the presentation. There are some prominent people making some statements about artificial intelligence effect of longevity. You probably heard that Dario Amodei of Anthropic made a statement that AI can expand life expectancy, double it in the next 12 years, so we can live 150 years. How do we get there, and can we get there, in your opinion?
Thanks. So, did you say 12 years?
Yeah, 12 years. 12 years.
By 2037, it's 150 years left.
This is being recorded, so I'm just never going to say never, so I don't look dumb in 12 years from now. I think there's going to be a huge marathon to get there. It's going to take a tremendous amount of work. There's some kind of genetic barriers that we're brushing up against. There's also, cultural and physiological barriers. I guess one way I'll answer your question is, for whom? And so I think that people in Brian Johnson's shoes and, people who are living in very affluent countries, who have access to nutritious food, who can work out every day, who can sleep, excellently, and kind of have, genetics that are robust enough to have it, I think that they will see dramatic increases in their lifespan and their health span too. So I really am a believer that people will start to live longer. I think the record, I was reading Outlive by Peter Attia, and I think the record is it's 122. I might be wrong, but it's something like that. I think that we will exceed that record very soon. But I think that the benefits will be accrued to the very most elite echelon of people. But then going back to our disparities question, I think we have to think about how can those benefits and the things that we learn by doing blueprints and by being as healthy as we can, how can we distribute that to as many people as possible? So I don't know if we will double in 12 years. I think that would be a fantastic outcome. And I think if we do, this goes beyond my scope of being a scientist. I hope that people are fulfilled and happy. And that's something that a doctor can't provide. I think that comes from within. But what's the point of having a longer life if it's not worth living? So, but yeah, I think that's a very provocative statement and very energizing to hear. So, fingers crossed.
I'm really fascinated with the longevity scope and it's particularly anti-aging. I would love to hear your thoughts on stem cells. I read a really interesting study on menstrual stem cells, so I would love to hear if you have any thoughts on how that factors into longevity and where it may be going in the future.
Thank you so much. In my graduate school, I actually worked in the low-key stem cell building. I don't know if you know. Yeah, I worked in the stem cell building. But that said, I had no personal exposure to stem cells, so I don't want to talk too much out of my depth here. The thing I'll say about stem cells is that, I remember like in the early 2000s, we were talking about stem cells and, people living longer and being superhuman and all of these things. But there are some real uses for them. One of the labs across from my PhD lab was using stem cells for osteoarthritis. So, that wear and tear type of joint pain that you might get in your knee where you get knee replacements. And they actually found that stem cells, were working well there. I'm just blanking on the exact type of stem cell and what kind of like pre-engineering they did. There's also been a study that came out in Nature, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, where they tried to use stem cells for Parkinson's. And there's no, like, it was like really phase 1, and like they don't know if it works or not. They just know that the patients like didn't die, and it's quote unquote probably safe. But time will tell if it actually abrogates like the development of Parkinson's over time. And so there are people making real headwinds here, but also caution saying that there are many clinics not in the U.S., but in other countries where the regulation's not as tight, which are selling stem cells to people for no good reason. And people are spending a lot of money on them. And there's actually been some very high-profile cases of contaminated vials of stem cells injecting into knees and giving people septic knees and people getting abscesses and things like that. And so there will be people who are trying to capitalize on this beautiful moment that we have where we all come together and use science for good. There will be the people who try to capitalize that without rigorous scientific practices. And so I would just exercise a lot of caution, but also be optimistic is how I would answer the question. But thank you so much.
They're legalizing stem cells in Florida. Just
amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Go Florida.
Do you have a question? Careful with the water.
Hi, thank you for your talk. I probably have two questions. First, may I comment there all biological ages we actually have huge variety and considered not reliable by some and by me as well. And second one about methylation. When we look at methylation DNA, we say well, DNA is not our destiny. So what do you know about what is measured in probably, I don't know, markers, biomarkers, and if there is any general indication of better biomarkers like metabolomics or anything in this direction, if it can predict better, like as of today methylation, not just by genes.
Could you two in the back be quiet? I can hear you up here.
Yeah, to your first comment, I totally agree. I mean, I think age is very diverse, and it can be diverse within somebody, and you can kind of be more youthful and younger and older, all within the span of your own life, and it's not necessarily monotonically increasing. I think to your second point, in terms of methylation, yes, like I think that metabolomics, there was a paper that I did not include about metabolomics because I just didn't have time. But there are many groups working on the metabolism as well, the metabolites in your blood. There is a lot of signal in there as well. I think the thing that, maybe a limitation of my talk is I don't have like a bar plot of head-to-head every single modality and which one produces a better age. And so, but I think a little bit for good reason, because I don't think that there's one modality which is really the clear winner just yet. And it has more to do with the machine learning, the kind of authors who wrote the paper, than the actual modality just yet. So I wouldn't want to write one off. For example, the protein marker that was published in Nature Medicine that I showed has an incredible, Pearson R coefficient. And that's protein, it's not methylation or metabolomics, but that probably just speaks to the quality of the data set that they used and the scientific rigor and the artificial intelligence that they used. So I think all these modalities, there's a place for all of them. There's no clear winner just yet. And I think feedback to myself is to have, it would be cool to have a head-to-head comparison to address your point, but thanks for the great question.
Okay, let's do quick questions. Here, quick question.
I was going to just say there is a winning modality, and that is the test of your functional fitness. How heavy you can lift, how fast you can run, how far you can run, right? So I think a lot of, from biohacking standpoint, I'm a biohacker, a lot of people have given up on all these biological age tests and said a test of your functional fitness is actually what's going to really tell you how your health span is for your life.
Absolutely, yeah.
Hi, great talk.
Quick questions and quick answers.
Yeah, you were you're doing trials on the drugs. So what drugs are you actually using and why are you using them?
Oh, me personally?
No. The research, you said that you guys are doing clinical trials on the drugs, and what age group are you actually testing in that?
Oh yeah, quick answers.
Yeah, I don't have all the specifics, but some of them are lifestyle interventions like a calorie restriction, and it shows that calorie restriction, is correlated positively with metabolic outcomes. There's one on rapamycin, and similar. I don't know all the metrics offhand, but and actually I couldn't find the actual article in time to post like a nice figure from it. But there's kind of other agents that people are trying. Another one is plasma, so giving plasma from a younger person, like a blood product from a younger person into an older person as well. Very science fiction, but we wonder if it actually helps people with Alzheimer's disease too. And then others are just like good old-fashioned like diet interventions. So it turns out diet interventions, just like your mother would have told you, work super well, and others are exercise interventions. So I don't have all the specifics for you today, but I think it's an excellent question and a great area of further study that needs biomarkers to understand.
Hi, so my background's in nutrition and medicine, and one question that I had is how do these biomarkers actually drive concrete interventions? Something as simple as diabetes and weight loss that you mentioned, behavioral change is hard, and we know that the biomarkers don't necessarily translate into the outcomes. So my question is, rather than predicting outcomes, what do you think will actually change outcomes? Is there a biomarker that you foresee in longevity that we can actually concretely use to change something? Or can you just share your initial thank you?
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic question, and coming from a dietitian point of view, you have a lot of expertise that as a doctor, I don't have. You're a doctor as well. Oh, you're a doctor as well. Oh, sorry. Okay. So, but not a cancer doctor, probably a doctor that knows a ton about diet, and so I think that's really wonderful. And I think what I'll say is that I was, part of my venture life is I was talking to a company recently that is actually looking at, things like your lean body mass and making biomarkers for that. I think really it comes down to a few things. One is that the big picture from a pharma point of view or from like a science point of view is that these biomarkers will allow us to kind of instantaneously know outcomes in clinical trials. But for patients, they'll allow a patient to really know over time the impact of an intervention. And so instead of, you walk into your doctor's office, it's some old dude and they're just like, quit smoking, like, eat better, stop getting Uber Eats, like the classic things that you always hear. What if your like metabolic age or your protein age actually decreased in the 3 months where you quit smoking? And what kind of feedback and what kind of psychologically would that do to a patient if they actually saw that? So might there be some like feedback loop to a patient? But I think there's nothing more important than how a patient actually feels. And so to our amazing photographer's point, like those actual physiological metrics, like how much can you lift, can you run, VO2 max? Or if you're an older adult, like can you actually spend time with your grandchildren? Can you lift a child, right? Can you take part in family outings? Can you travel across the country to make it for Thanksgiving? These are the things that I think biomarkers fall short of and struggle to quantify, but are so important. And so if a patient has feedback, they feel better, and it's all coherent, I think that would make a lot of sense. And thank you, doctor, for your question.
Thank you. This is my question. I'm Jen. So I'm curious, what's next in your research? Or can you share?
Yeah, a complex question. So I'm, in my I guess my academic research, I'm researching with single-cell RNA sequencing lung cancer, and I'm trying to figure out which immune cell populations are mediating different outcomes within lung cancer treated by immunotherapy. So continuing on from my PhD research, but I think in the broader spectrum of things and my broader interests are in healthcare and AI. are in biomarkers, and in all of these things together. I'm actually particularly very interested in how large language models can read the clinical chart and predict patient outcomes and help us have kind of a large language model health score that's read, figured out by reading a chart instead of having a human doctor read it. I think that will give us a lot of insight and a lot of markers about how long patients will live. There's been some early work on large language models predicting from a patient's record in the cancer context, like how long somebody will live, and I wonder if it might help us guide therapy selection in cancer itself. So I think things with the large language models and the patient record are very provocative, very exciting. I'd like to kind of mesh that in a multi-omic way with traditional things like the immune system, blood draws, and figuring out the best chemo or immunotherapy to use in a cancer patient. Those are some of the things that really excite me.
And then one follow-up, and how would you want your research to impact health care policies or health insurance here in the U.S. or world?
Yeah, great question again. I was born in Canada, but what I would say, I went to school here and done medical things here as well. What I'll say is that I want insurers to be incentivized the same way that I want incentives to be aligned between patients, insurers, and doctors. I want us all to be in the same boat. I want us to invest in things that make real measurable impact in health span and lifespan and quality of life. I want my patients to have more good years on planet Earth. I want them to be able to go to Thanksgiving to spend time with their children. And I want insurers to pay for things that allow for those incredible moments that give us joy in our lives. So I want evidence-based, effective things that we can measure with biomarkers to be invested in by insurance.
Great tagline.
All right, last question. 3, 2, okay, quickly.
This is a quick question. So in general, for precision medicine or personalized medicine, what do you think of DNA imputation tools, like websites which will let you input your raw data to 23andMe and give you risk scores for various categories? One was Impute.me, I think it was banned, but there are many other websites.
I think fantastic question. Extremely early days. Basically, I was asking my attending, one of the other days, like, why aren't we just genetically sequencing everybody? Part of it is, a money thing. It's very hard for patients to afford that, to pay privately, or for it to be covered by, a government insurer, or by, by a private insurer. And so I think part of it is political, part of it is money. And part of it is that doctors, it's really new to us, like correlating genetic sequencing outcomes with actual patient outcomes. But it's something I'm extremely excited about. I'm excited to learn more about it. And I think that we will come into a future where actually every patient is genetically sequenced when they enter into the clinical context. That first touch point when you enter into a family doctor's office, or you enter into the emergency room, I think that your blood will be sequenced eventually one day, and it'll give us a tremendous amount of insight. So that's something I'm extremely excited about in the future, but maybe not quite in the clinical context just yet. Thank you.
All right, thank you all for coming. And let's give our speaker a round of applause and continue to enjoy. Thank you.
Hey, nice to meet you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, I'm in New York, but I'm in Chicago. Yeah, why don't you just
hello.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, please interview with me. No, I will. Seriously. Yeah, please. I'd love to. We're just gonna. Yeah, I think too. It gives you something similar to this. Great talk, because we didn't realize so much. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Yeah, this is
Academic environment that we're trying to create. And so, to my first I'll explain. Here's how we try and address it. We try and treat it like a lecture, as if you're like a university.
When I take the time and effort to mind them, to bring people that can bring further,
5% left to go.
that I can bring further.
No, very, very busy time for me to do that.
Bring money and interest to the situation.
Nice to meet you. Yeah, thank you. I'll start getting
I apologize.
We did enjoy the event.
Thank you guys for coming. Thank you guys for coming.
Hey, you two, stop the camera. One, two. Sorry, I just moved this guy. You guys are still recording?
Oh, look at that.
Okay. One more. One more. Sorry. I'm on
It's like a just like kind of workout. It's like it doesn't get too timey and funky. So on the run. I get just a run before going I'm sorry. Oh, today? Like it's 4 hours. Usually I do a tempo workout after it, but like I think it's set to give up the tempo workout. Okay, yeah. Well, no, I mean, just kind of this sort of like topic that you're saying. I mean, I don't know if you're in high school or the super babies now. I guess there was one in between, which I didn't. So I figured, hey, this one's
Yeah, they're very heavy. This is just something to not put in your bag. Like just to hang them on the side. So I found it off Amazon. It works pretty well, to be honest, because I don't want to like put my shoes in the bag. So like it was the last minute and like I read it with the
Yeah, I guess not exactly, but no, actually, most of the years, I guess you're no, I don't want to
Yeah. He was like saying, oh my god.
I think it's like not as